Chapter 8. No man, I think, ever forgets the first time he is brought face to face with perfect beauty in woman. He may have caught fleeting glimpses of loveliness on many fair faces often, bright eyes that may have flashed on him like starbeams, the hues of a dazzling complexion may now and then have charmed him, or the seductive outlines of a graceful figure. All these are as mere peeps into the infinite. But when such vague and passing impressions are suddenly drawn together in one focus, when all his dreamy fancies of form and color take visible and complete manifestation in one living creature who looks down upon him as if it were from an empyrean of untouched maiden pride and purity, it is more to his honor than his shame if his senses swoon at the ravishing vision, and he, despite his rough masculinity and brute strength, becomes nothing but the merest slave to passion. In this way I was overwhelmed and conquered without any chance of deliverance, when Sybil Elton's violet eyes, lifted slowly from the shadow of their dark lashes, rested upon me with that indefinable expression of mingled interest and indifference which is supposed to indicate high breeding, but which more frequently intimidates and repulses the frank and sensitive soul. The Lady Sybil's glance repelled, but I was none the less attracted. Romanes and I had entered the Earl of Elton's box at the Haymarket between the first and second acts of the play, and the Earl himself, an unimpressive, bald-headed, red-faced old gentleman with fuzzy white whiskers, had risen to welcome us, seizing the prince's hand and shaking it with particular effusiveness. I learned afterwards that Lucio had lent him £1,000 on easy terms, a fact which partly accounted for his friendly fervour of his greeting. His daughter had not moved, but in a minute or two later, when he addressed her somewhat sharply, saying, "Sybil, Prince Romanes and his friend Mr. Geoffrey Tempest," she turned her head and honoured us both with the chill glance I have endeavoured to describe, and the very faintest possible bow as an acknowledgment of her presence. Her exquisite beauty smote me dumb and foolish. I could find nothing to say, and stood silent and confused, with a strange sensation of bewilderment upon me. The old earl made some remark about the play, which I scarcely heard, though I answered vaguely and at haphazard. The orchestra was playing abominably, as is usual in the theatres, and its brazen din sounded like the noise of the sea in my ears. I had not much real consciousness of anything save the wondrous loveliness of the girl who faced me, clad in pure white, with a few diamonds shining about her like stray dewdrops on a rose. Lucio spoke to her, and I listened. "At last, Lady Sybil," he said, bending towards her deferentially, "at last I have the honour of meeting you. I have seen you often, as one sees a star, at a distance." She smiled, a smile so slight and cold that it scarcely lifted the corners of her lovely lips. "I did not think I had ever seen you," she replied, "and yet there's something oddly familiar in your face. I have heard my father speak of you constantly. I need scarcely say his friends are always mine." He bowed. "To merely speak to Lady Sybil Elton is counted sufficient to make the man so privileged happy," he said. "To be her friend is to discover the lost paradise." She flushed, then grew suddenly very pale, and shivered. She drew her cloak towards her. Romanes wrapped its perfumed silken folds carefully round her beautiful shoulders. How I grudged him the dainty task! He then turned to me, and placed a chair just behind hers. "Will you sit here, Geoffrey?" he suggested. "I want to have a moment's business chat with Lord Elton." Recovering my self-possession a little, I hastened to take the chance he thus generously gave to me to ingratiate myself in the young lady's favour, and my heart gave a foolish bound of joy, because she smiled encouragingly as I approached her. "You are a great friend of Prince Romanes?" she asked softly, as I sat down. "Yes, we are very intimate," I replied. "He is a delightful companion." "So I should imagine." And she looked over at him where he sat next to her father, talking earnestly in low tones. "He is singularly handsome." I made no reply. Of course, Lucio's extraordinary personal attractiveness was undeniable, but I rather grudged her praise bestowed on him just then. Her remarks seemed to me as tactless as when a man with one pretty woman beside him loudly admires another in her hearing. I did not myself assume to be actually handsome, but I knew I was better looking than the ordinary run of men. So, out of sudden pique, I remained silent, and presently the curtain rose and the play was resumed. A very questionable scene was enacted, the woman with the past being well to the front of it. I felt disgusted at the performance, and looked at my companions to see if they were too similarly moved. There was no sign of disapproval on Lady Sybil's fair countenance. Her father was bending forward eagerly, apparently gloating over every detail. Romana's wore that inscrutable expression of his, in which no feeling whatever can be discerned. The woman with the past went on with her hysterical sham heroics, and the mealy-mouthed fool of a hero declared her to be a pure angel wronged, and the curtain fell amid loud applause. One energetic hiss came from the gallery, affecting the occupants of the stalls to scandalized amazement. "England has progressed," said Romanes in a soft, half-bantering tone. "Once upon a time this play would have been hooted off the stage as likely to corrupt the social community, but now the only voice of protest comes from the lower classes." "Are you a Democrat, Prince?" inquired Lady Sybil, waving her fan indolently to and fro. "Not I. I always insist on the pride and supremacy of worth. I do not mean money value, but intellect, and in this way I foresee a new aristocracy. When the high grows corrupt, it falls and becomes the low. When the low educates itself and aspires, it becomes the high. This is simply the course of nature." "But, God bless my soul," exclaimed Lord Elton, "you don't call this play low or immoral, do you? It's a realistic study of modern social life. That's what it is. These women, you know, these poor souls with a past, are very interesting." "Very," murmured his daughter. "In fact, it would seem that for women with no such past there can be no future. Virtue and modesty are quite out of date, and have no chance whatever." I leaned towards her, half whispering, "Lady Sybil, I'm glad to see this wretched play offends you." She turned her deep eyes on me in mingled surprise and amusement. "Oh no, it doesn't," she declared. "I have seen so many like it, and I have read so many novels on just the same theme. I assure you, I am quite convinced that the so-called bad woman is the only popular type of our sex with men. She gets all the enjoyment possible out of life. She frequently makes an excellent marriage, and has, as the Americans say, a good time all round. It's the same thing with our convicted criminals. In prison they are much better fed than the honest working man. I believe it is quite a mistake for women to be respectable. They are only considered dull." "Ah, now you are only joking," I said, with an indulgent smile. "You know that in your heart you think very differently." She made no answer. Just as then the curtain went up again, disclosing the unclean lady of the piece, having a good time all around on board a luxury yacht. During during the unnatural and stilted during the unnatural and stilted dialogue which followed, I withdrew a little back into the shadow of the box, and all that self-esteem and assurance of which I had been suddenly deprived by a glance at Lady Sybil's beauty came back to me, and a perfectly stolid coolness and composure succeeded to the first feverish excitement of my mind. I recalled Lucio's words, "I believe Lady Sybil is for sale," and I thought triumphantly of my millions. I glanced at the old Earl, abjectly pulling at his white whiskers while he listened anxiously to what were evidently money schemes propounded by Lucio. Then my gaze came back appraisingly to the lovely curves of Lady Sybil's milk-white throat, her beautiful arms and bosom, her rich brown hair of the shade of ripe chestnut, her delicate haughty face, languid eyes, and brilliant complexion, and I murmured inwardly, "All this loveliness is purchasable, and I will purchase it." At that very instant she turned to me and said, "Are you the famous Mr. Tempest, are you not?" "Famous?" I echoed, with a deep sense of gratification. "Well, I'm scarcely that, yet. My book is not yet published." Her eyebrows arched themselves surprisedly. "Your book? I did not know you had written one." My flattered vanity sank to zero. "It has been extensively advertised," I began impressively, but she interrupted me with a laugh. "Oh, I never read advertisements. It is too much trouble. When I asked you if you were the famous Mr. Tempest, I meant to say that you are the great millionaire who has been so talked of lately." I bowed at a somewhat chill assent. She looked at me inquisitively over the laced edge of her fan. "How delightful it must be for you to have so much money," she said. "And you are young, too, and good-looking." Pleasure took the place of vexed amour propre, and I smiled. "You're very kind, Lady Sybil." "Why?" she asked, laughing. Such a delicious low laugh. "Because I tell you the truth. You are young, and you are good-looking. Millionaires are generally such appalling creatures. Fortune, while giving them money, frequently deprives them both of both brains and personal attractiveness. And now do tell me about your book." She seemed to have suddenly dispensed with her former reserve, and during the last act of the play we conversed freely in whispers which assisted us to become almost confidential. Her manner to me now was full of grace and charm, and the fascination she exerted over my senses became complete. The performance over, we all left the box together, and as Lucio was still apparently engrossed with Lord Elton, I had the satisfaction of escorting Lady Sybil to her carriage. When her father joined her, Lucio and I both stood together looking in at the window of the brougham, and the Earl, getting hold of my hand, shook it up and down with boisterous friendliness. "Come and dine with us. Come and dine," he spluttered excitedly. "Come, let me see. This is Tuesday. Come on Thursday. Short notice. No ceremony. My wife is paralyzed, I'm sorry to say. She can't receive. She can only see a few people now and then when she is in the humor. Her sister keeps house and does the honors. Aunt Charlotte, eh, Sybil? Ha ha ha! The deceased wife's sister Bill would never be of any use to me, for if his wife were to die, I shouldn't be anxious to marry Miss Charlotte Fitzroy. Ha ha ha! A perfectly unapproachable woman, sir. A model. Ha ha! Come and dine with us, Mr. Tempest. Lucio, you bring him along with you, eh? We've got a young lady staying with us, an American, dollars, accents and all, and by Jove, I believe she wants to marry me, ha ha ha, and is waiting for Lady Elton to go to a better world first, ha ha. Come along, come and see the little American, eh? Thursday shall it be?" Over the fair features of Lady Sybil there passed a faint shadow of annoyance at her father's allusion to the little American, but she said nothing. Only her looks appeared to question our intentions as well as to persuade our wills, and she seemed satisfied when we both accepted the invitation given. Another apologetic chuckle from the Earl, and a couple of handshakes, a slight graceful bow from her lovely ladyship as we raised our hats in farewell, and the Elton equipage rolled away, leaving us to enter our own vehicle, which, amid the officious roarings of street boys and policemen, had just managed to draw up in front of the theatre. As we drove off, Lucio peered inquisitively at me. I could see the steely glitter of his fine eyes in the semi-darkness of the brougham, and said, "Well?" I was silent. "Don't you admire her?" he went on. "I must confess she is cold, a very chilly vestal indeed, but snow often covers volcanoes. She has good features and a naturally clear complexion." Despite my intention to be reticent, I could not endure this tame description. "She is perfectly beautiful," I said emphatically. "The dullest of eyes must see that. There's not a fault to be found with her, and she is wise to be reserved and cold. Were she too lavish of her smile and too seductive in her manner, she might drive many men not only into folly, but madness." I felt rather than saw the cat-like glance he flashed upon me. "Positively, Geoffrey, I believe that notwithstanding the fact that we are only in February, the wind blows upon you due south, bringing with it the odors of rose and orange blossom. I fancy Lady Sybil has powerfully impressed you." "Did you wish me to be impressed?" I asked. "I, my dear fellow? I wish nothing that you yourself do not wish. I accommodate my ways to my friends' humours. If asked for my opinion, I should say that it is rather a pity if you are really smitten to the young lady, as there are no obstacles to be encountered. A love affair, to be conducted with spirit and enterprise, should always bristle with opportunity and difficulty, opposition and difficulty, real or invented. A little secrecy and a good deal of wrong-doing, with such a sly assignations in the telling of any amount of lies, such things add to the agreeableness of love-making on this planet." I interrupted him. "See here, Lucio, you're very fond of alluding to this planet as if you knew anything about other planets," I said impatiently. "This planet, as you have somewhat contemptuously call it, is the only one we have any business with." He bent his piercing looks so ardently upon me that for the moment I was startled. "If that is so," he answered, Why in heaven's name do you not let the other planets alone? Why do you strive to fathom their mysteries and movements? If men, as you say, have no business with any planet save this one, why are they ever on the alert to discover the secrets of mightier worlds? A secret which happily it may some day terrify them to know. The solemnity of his voice and the inspired expression of his face awed me. I had no reply ready, and he went on. Do not let us talk, my friend, of planets, not even of this particular pinpoint among them known as Earth. Let us return to a better subject, the Lady Sybil. As I have already said, there are no obstacles in the way of your wooing and winning her, if such is your desire. Geoffrey Tempest, as mere author of books, would indeed be insolent to aspire to the hand of an earl's daughter, but Geoffrey Tempest, millionaire, will be a welcome suitor. Poor Lord Elton's affairs are in a bad way. He is almost out at elbows. The American woman who is boarding with him. Boarding with him, I exclaimed. Surely he does not keep a boarding house. Lucio laughed heartily. No, no, must not put it so coarsely, Geoffrey. It is simply this, that the Earl and Countess of Elton give the prestige of their home and protection to Miss Diana Chesney, the American aforesaid, for the trifling sum of 2,000 guineas per annum. The Countess, being paralyzed, is obliged to hand over her duties of chaperonage to her sister, Miss Charlotte Fitzroy, but the halo of the coronet still hovers over Miss Chesney's brow. She has her own suite of rooms in the house, and goes wherever it is proper for her to go under Miss Fitzroy's care. Lady Sybil does not like the arrangement, and is therefore never seen anywhere except with her father. She will not join in companionship with Miss Chesney, and has said so pretty plainly. I admire her for it, I said warmly. I really am surprised that Lord Elton should condescend. Condescend to what? Inquired Luciano. Condescend to take 2,000 guineas a year? Good heavens, man, there are no ends of lords and ladies who will readily agree to perform such an act of condescension. Blue blood is getting thin and poor, and only money can thicken it. Diana Chesney is worth over $1,000,000, and if Lady Elton were to die conveniently soon, I should not be surprised to see that little American step triumphantly into her vacant place.